Hello, faithful listeners. Editing Travis here. This is the post recording of my radio show that was recorded on Sunday, this most recent Sunday. I lost a little bit of clips in the process. However, I do hope you enjoy this re recording. In the future, I will do my best to avoid this. Please enjoy. God bless.
Dive into that whole thing is kind of like every single day you have many decisions that you can make or you can not make that will impact your day, impact your life in general. So the idea that Saint Demetrius is the patron saint of soldiers, you can kind of think of, I have my buddy Wyatt who is in ROTC right now, so shout out to him, but we're all soldiers in our own way. So maybe we don't fight battles, but we fight spiritual battles. We fight them on the daily. It's just about making that correct decision, knowing what is right. And we'll get into that later on. So since I missed last show, I'm going to touch on the most important stuff that occurred in the past couple weeks. So to start, Pope Leo the 14th, he has made clear that being pro-life, in his view, includes humane treatment of migrants and refugees, not just the opposition to abortion. So he has publicly supported calls for more compassionate migration policies. He has argued that caring for the poor, displaced, and marginalized is integral to the Church's mission. The Church has no borders. Those that seek refuge within its walls have refuge, no matter what country they are in. So we are really starting to get a better understanding that Pope Leo's papacy leans more into social justice, global solidarity, and human dignity in the broad sense. Kind of almost picking up with what late Pope Francis was working on. It's wonderful to see, honestly, that kind of like in the U.S., you'll notice how, you have like a Democratic president, he does stuff that he believes is right, and then following, you'll have maybe a Republican president that pretty much undoes everything that he did, that the last president did. But within the Church, we don't have problems like this because we have a papacy is to rule as the head of the Church. There's guidelines for how people need to live their lives within the Church. And so when you have somebody who's Pope, they usually always, except for a couple offshoots, they follow the same rule set. And so with the papacy, we just see how Pope Leo is just following up with what Pope Francis was doing, the good. So to kind of go along with this, although some people, you've probably seen the odd news post that a lot of people were hoping that Pope Leo the 14th would be more traditional, quotation air quotes there, in style, and might focus or shift the focus away from some progressive themes. But the recent commentary suggests that he hasn't turned that way. There's a difference between wanting to lean into traditional stuff and being outright just heretical. So we've noticed how, he recently let a cardinal process with a alt Latin mass, which is a traditional thing to believe in. But some of the things that people were saying is heretical on Pope Francis's part were completely out of line because they weren't. They were simply just, he just cared more about certain groups of people because they were being treated unfairly. So his actions and language are described as like confounding conservative expectations. Instead of a pivot, he appears to continue and perhaps amplify a socially concerned agenda. Now, it doesn't matter what side you find yourself on the spectrum. It is blatantly obvious that no matter what a pope is, he needs to be neutral upon, in general. Moving on, we had the public address on world hunger, which was the 16th of October. So still not this week, past week, everything that I missed. So on the 16th, at the headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, in Rome, he condemned the persistence of hunger as an ethical derailment. He cited UN data of about 673 million chronically undernourished people, calling the use of hunger as a weapon of war a violation of international humanitarian law. Why this matters? He is not only focused inwardly on church matters, but speaking globally on justice issues, hunger, war, exploitation. It shows his willingness to address structural global issues, as he should as Pope. That it's kind of like his job to speak out against the mistreatment of people. On the 19th of October, we've had canonization of 7 saints, thankfully. So we had Blessed Maria de San Jose Alvarado Cardozo. She was a Venezuelan nun, founder of the Augustinian Recollect Sisters of the Heart of Jesus. Blessed Giovanni Barra, who is an Italian diocesan priest known for pastoral outreach and youth formation. Then we had Blessed Pedro Nolasco de Leon. So he was a Spanish Mercedarian missionary martyred in the Philippines. Blessed Maria Giuseppe Scandola. She was an Italian missionary to Africa and co-founder of the Comboni Missionary Sisters. Then we had Blessed Peter Turat. He was a catechist and martyr from Papua New Guinea, now the nation's first saint. Blessed Jose Gregorio Hernandez Cisneros. He was a Venezuelan doctor nicknamed the Doctor of the Poor. And then also Blessed Maria Maddalena of the Incarnation, Caterina Sordini. She was the Italian founder of the Perpetual Adorers of the Blessed Sacrament. So, honestly, it's wonderful to always see new saints being canonized. We'll kind of get into it, but Pope John Paul II was the he canonized the most amount of saints. So maybe we'll have Pope Leo succeed him and canonize more saints than even he did. But who's to say? So this past week, now to get into the more recent stuff, the Catholic feast day for Monday, October 20th, is St. Paul of the Cross. He was the founder of the Passionists and is honored for his devotion for the Passion of Jesus Christ. St. Pedro Calungsod, a young Filipino martyr and catechist. He is honored for his courage and steadfast faith, particularly by the Catholic Church, and he is the patron saint of the Filipino youth and oversees Filipino work. So St. Pedro is also underneath Monday, October 20th. And then as for the 22nd, I believe, we have St. Pedro, who is a young Filipino who, with Jesuit missionaries, spread the Catholic faith in the Marianas Islands. So I believe he is the feast day for October 20th, and then his missionary work is the feast day for the 21st, as well as Father Diego Luis de San Vitores, who was martyred on April 2nd, 1672. But I believe we celebrate their martyrdom on the 21st. So on Wednesday the 22nd, we celebrated the feast day of St. John Paul II. He's remembered on this day because it marks the anniversary of inauguration of his pontificate in 1978. St. John Paul II is probably by far my favorite pope ever. Well, fun fact. My grandmother absolutely loved him when he was around. And I think that for everything that he did, the way that he showed true compassion, he's really, he's someone that I like to set at a higher level for myself to kind of want to be like. The way that he forgave those who hurt him. The way that he kind of held himself around people. One of my favorite stories is how he was shot, and later on he actually met with his shooter. I believe it was maybe a year afterwards, and he spoke with him. He got on terms with him. He, in fact, actually offered him reconciliation for what he had done. And it honestly, we'll get into it a little bit more in the second half of the show, but for the most part, I think that the way that he conducted himself was so wonderful that I want to be just like the way that he was, to kind of like act as that person of good in a world where, quite frankly, we see a lot of bad. Like, I want revenge against this person. I want to seek them out, have get retribution for what they did against me. But yet he never did that. He never wanted retribution against somebody. He acted as that good. And I think that everybody should try to do that.
This is Rob.
And I'm Monica.
And we're the Sky Drops.
And you're listening to WSBU 88.3.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to WSBU, The Buzz, St. Bonaventure, the Bonaventure Son. So, we were kind of talking about St. John Paul, and how I honestly look up to him more than, quite frankly, any other saint. I think he's wonderful. But the October 22nd was his feast day. Now we're going to move into October 23rd. So October 23rd is the memorial of St. John of Capistrano. He was an Italian Franciscan friar. Franciscans, St. Bonaventure, it's great. We love him. Theologian and military chaplain, known for his preaching and for his leading a crusading army to victory against the Turks at the Battle of Belgrade in 1453. He's the patron saint of military chaplains, judges, and those in the legal profession. So, again, also with him. And then, as for today, we have St. Demetrius, like kind of this theme along this week of military, of soldiers, of everybody, and anybody who is in a legal profession. So if you're a lawyer, this is your guy. I like to think that St. John of Capistrano should be kind of the forefront of anybody. So obviously when you go into a court, you have somebody, you place your hand upon the Bible and you swear oath against that. But I think that also the judges should also kind of seek to acting like St. John, because as he is the patron saint of judges, judges have a very important job to kind of lay out the law. And so to use him as their guiding figure, I think that's great. So as for October 24th, we had St. Anthony Mary Claret. So St. Anthony Mary Claret, recently Father Steve actually went into this a little bit during his homily at Daily Mass, but he was an archbishop who founded the Congregation of Missionary Sons of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Well, October 24th is his feast day. A calendar is needed to determine if that Monday is the feast day for October 24th, but the kind of the liturgical calendar, it gets a little bit messed up, but October 24th is the feast day for St. Anthony Mary Claret. He was an archbishop, obviously, as I said. He started missionary work, and he was honestly a great guy. I think that he's, again, a lot of these saints that I'm going to mention throughout these days, each and every one of them you can take away. I really implore you, because I'm only giving you a baseline, like face value of who they were, but every single one of them has something that you should look into, because every single one of them was made a saint for a reason. Recently with Carlo Acutis, he's somebody to look up to, because he is the first millennial saint, because it kind of adds to the fact that he was not only a saint, but he was the first millennial saint. It helps you get to that point of knowing, like, not only, like, you can look at a lot of saints and they're like, oh, well, these guys lived hundreds of years ago. How can they really, like, show me how to live my life? But when you have somebody who was born so recent and to be canonized as a saint, it helps you know how to live your life as a Catholic, as a Christian. So I implore you to go into every one of these guys' like Wikipedia or whatever, and look through them. See what you can take away from them. And then most recently, October 25th is this feast day for Saints Crispin and Crispinian. They were martyred twins who were shoemakers. This day is also known as St. Crispin's Day and is in commemoration for several other saints, including St. Christanus and St. Daria. as well as a group of English martyrs. So they were Roman twins who were early Christian martyrs and the patron saints of shoemakers, tanners, saddlers, and leather workers. They fled to Gaul, preached Christianity, and then were executed around 286 AD. So, again, a lot of these saints have, they're patron saints for something. So if anybody's currently in like OCIA, or if you're listening and you're just a wee little lad and you're in confirmation and you don't know who to choose, take from this show of all of these wonderful saints. See what really like dignifies, like kind of exemplifies who you are. Like if you plan on being if you plan on wanting to go into the army, maybe think about Saint Demetrius or any other saint that maybe is along those same lines. Or if you want to be a judge, Saint John. If you want to go into being a lawyer, Saint John. Just look at these saints, see how they live their lives, and really try to imitate that, because that's what they did. They imitated other saints, or, I mean, early on, Saint Paul. They imitated Christ. That's kind of that's the goal, to imitate Christ. And all of these saints imitated them so well, in fact, that they were canonized as saints. We're going to get into the more homily kind of section of this show in just a little bit. For now, we're going to run a little PSA. Change in my life. And so I sat there in the silence of nature. I witnessed how the acorn falls from the tree, and it made me think how change can come in a very fast and unapologetic way. On the other hand, I also saw how the leaf falls from the tree, in that it takes a long while. It's methodical as it twists and turns with the wind. However, there is no doubt that it will soon reach the ground. In all these things, I noticed how change comes in many fashions, even to how the branch that falls after so long can impact the leaf and hasten its descent. It helped me reflect on my own life and realize that no matter how fast or slow change comes in your life, it's about how we respond to it that dictates how we continue. Change will happen. You have to choose to do what is right. It kind of, to follow up with it, within our responsorial psalm and gospel acclamation today. So, the responsorial psalm was, "The Lord hears the cry of the poor." And the gospel acclamation was, God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ and entrusting us to the message of salvation. So, about making those right decisions. Both of these shows us, as Christians, we play a key role in the plan that Christ set out. We find out how Christ came to redeem the world, save us from sin, but in that we still have free will to do as we choose. Therefore, as Christians, Christ entrusted us to spread the message of salvation to those who did not live during his time to hear the good news right there. It's our job to help those in need, not just to those who are poor in virtue or spirit, but those who are homeless, starving, hurting on the inside or the outside, the poor in spirit and mind. We preach the gospel by acting it out. Recently during a homily, Father Steve had a very good way of putting it. He recounted how his grandfather would say that he cannot hear you because your actions are speaking louder than words. Act as Christ did. We need to realize that as Christians, Christ enabled us to be able to talk to those who need him most, to point towards him. When I was in confirmation, I was having a very difficult time as to who I wanted to choose for my confirmation saint. And sometime along the road, I looked through St. John the Baptist. I very much enjoyed watching the baptisms at church because I always thought that they were beautiful, like seeing this little child getting holy water poured on top of its head. And it would always Either he or she would like scream out, cry, or sometimes they'd giggle. But I thought it was beautiful because it's seeing how, as Christ set out, he taught that these two parents, mother and father, need to take it upon themselves to make the first step for their children, to give them baptism. Not saying that they can't make their own decisions as they grow up, because that's wrong. That's taking away free will. However, to make that first step in the right direction, to show them what is right, by giving them that baptism, and then by taking them to church as they grow. What they do after they turn 18, who's to say? And frankly, that's not the parents' job completely to make that decision for them. But as their kids, they are to be taught the way that needs to be. They need to be given the right instruction. Because if you're not given right instruction, how can you do anything? My buddy, Justin, who was in BOCES while we were in high school, he would handle heavy machinery, and unless he was taught how to use that machinery, he'd have no idea what he was doing. He might have an idea of like, oh, maybe this does this because it says so on the control panel. However, if he wants to operate it well, he needs to know how. He needs it to be taught. And so it's the same way with us. While we might have a vague grasp on what it is we need to do in our lives, we don't know it fully. And the idea is that you need to have somebody there to teach you. That is supposed to be your parents. That is the job of the parent. And so, to kind of move into the gospel that we heard today, we hear of two men. One of them is a tax collector, and the other is a Pharisee. Similar to how I mentioned in the last show, in these times, tax collectors were seen as the spawn of Satan and were entirely evil. Not much has changed. But in this gospel, the two men go up to the temple to pray. The Pharisee prays out loud about how he gives his money to the church, fasts twice a week, not adulterous, he's not greedy, he's all these other things, etc. Meanwhile, the tax collector looks down. He doesn't even dare look up towards the sky as the Pharisee did. And he beats his chest and asks for forgiveness to the Lord. The takeaway from this parable is that within life you will find many people who in their own way are very much like the Pharisee, and in others you will see the tax collector. At times you will see how many men will be lenient towards the ideas of others and wear many masks, while others will stand true to their beliefs. You will find those who look for the approval of others, while many others will do what is right no matter what the world thinks. In all things, be the tax collector. Do not flaunt your good deeds, but ask for the Lord's forgiveness and thank Him for the great gifts that you have. That is the meaning of having humility and integrity. In this day and age, the world runs directly contrary to what is right in many cases. It's about distinguishing the difference between right and wrong, in following the right path, no matter how difficult, no matter how good it sounds to be on the other side. It's about knowing what leads to salvation. Distinguish what you want versus what you need. No matter how lost you may be, the true you is within. Do not wake up every morning to enter your closet of masks to put on for whomever you wish to please that day, like the Pharisee did. Please God by being yourself. We are not worthy of God's forgiveness. And yet, every single day, without fail, He gives it unceasingly. It's never too late to choose the right path. You will find in your life things that lead you down the wrong path will look so very good, so tasteful, and yet that's not the path that you need to take. There may be people in your life, there may be objects, things that you want, things that bring you happiness, but a lot of the time, when it doesn't lead to God, when it doesn't lead to Christ, it's going to lead you down a path that's going to make you worse than you were before. Don't always choose the momentary happiness, because that momentary happiness will be so unbelievably fleeting. It will burn you hollow and leave you without anything. Life is a tricky thing. It's about knowing what's right. In a lot of cases, it's very difficult to know what's right. But the funny thing is that we were given something called the Bible, which I used to tell my students that the Bible stands for basic instructions before leaving Earth. And I think that that's probably the most apt name that you can give it, because it really is. It gives you instructions in many different ways. Similarly, in Mass today, one of the prayers of the faithful was, "Do not despise others that hurt you." And I feel as though that could be very useful in a lot of cases. And so, in this day, we pray for God's wisdom to be able to choose what is right. And if you don't know what is right, you should probably pray about it. And if you don't pray about it, go to church. And if you don't go to church, talk to a priest, because sometimes he may just have the right thing to say in that right moment. I found a lot of priests have done that for me in the past. Shout out Father Rawson. To end off our segment today, I'm going to leave you with Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." It really establishes the central metaphor of God as the provider and caregiver. If you put all trust in the Lord and you do not chase the wants, the Lord in your path will be paved for you. The Lord will pave the path for you. I do hope that you enjoyed this segment. I hope you enjoyed listening to the Bonaventure Son today. I've been Travis. God bless you all, and I hope that all the graces of God be with you. Pax Vobiscum.